Hey guys, so I'm actually hiding in my bathroom. I've got kids doing e-learning today and I have a baby sleeping. And I've decided to go ahead and talk to you guys about why we decided to send our oldest two to private school and how that transition went and what I'm going to implement in the younger kids if they decide they want to go to private school first. I actually wrote it all down so I won't forget it. So the first thing is, why did we switch from homeschooling to private schooling? I've always mentioned it, and I think I might even have it in some older videos, that when the kids got to be around freshmen, they wanted to go into high school, especially if they were interested in sports or very specific clubs that they couldn't be a part of in like a homeschool group, that they could go to private school, public school, something like that. So I've always encouraged them to take that path if they wanted to. And since my oldest is a freshman this year, that was something that was important to her. She played soccer. She's played soccer for many, many years. And so that was something that was important to her, to be able to play soccer for a high school team. And so she wanted to do that. My seventh grader, though, obviously she's not in high school. She's a seventh grader. She kind of piggybacked off of it. And if you remember my second daughter, she was always more advanced in reading and things like that. And so it made sense to just let her piggyback off because she wanted to. And I thought that she wouldn't struggle with, she wouldn't need to catch up. She could just kind of jump right into it. So that's why both of them are going. I already have to make quite a drive, so it makes sense to just take both of them anyway, since they both wanted to go. Let's see. Oh, also, a big thing with my older daughter is she had a lot of friends that she played sports with, and they were all going to high school, and she kind of felt like left out. And so we knew that it was time that she made some good high school friends that were in a different area, that were good kids that she could, have her group of friends. So, and that's what she's done. So that's really great. So how did the transition go? And I think this is what's most important, is that we started late. So we started in July and school started in August. No, we started in June. So we applied mid to end of June because that's when we just finally decided that that's what we were going to do. And by then, obviously, the re-enrollment process is like happening now for this coming fall. So like the open enrollment, I think, opened yesterday until the end of the month for students who are currently at school. And so we were way behind compared to that, but they still had openings in both the freshman class and the seventh grade class. So we lucked out there. But it did kind of make everything really, really happen really quickly, especially since I was about to have a baby, like within that time frame. So I was hugely pregnant while we did all of the application process. And a lot of it was obviously applying, and it costs money to apply, so it was not cheap. And then waiting, and you have to fill out a huge application. And this specific school is religious, so we had to have a recommendation from a pastor. And then, so you had to wait for that. And then we had to do testing. And if you know from Meadow, which is what we've used, there's at least the older versions, which is what I've used, we didn't really do testing outside of math. So I never had my kids sit and do testing, especially on a computer. So this was new for them. But I mean, all the kids know computers now. They all have phones and things like that. So it's not hard for them to figure it out in a few minutes, how to do a test on a computer or whatever. So they went and we drove over there one day and they did testing. I think it was on an iPad even, maybe, for math and English. I think it was grammar and comprehension. And then we got the results when they emailed me like a couple days later and asked for an interview. So it was really I want to say it was within like 2 weeks we got all of this done. So we applied, we had to do a recommendation letter. We obviously paid to apply for application fee. And then they took their testing. And basically the testing was just to say what grade would they be in. So I told them, okay, well, we should have a 7th grader and a freshman. But with homeschooling, it's not always equal. they don't always learn the same things in the same way or at the same time. So I understand at least kind of figuring out, hey, maybe you're saying if she's a freshman, but maybe she's better as a sophomore, maybe she's better as an 8th grader, things like that. But we didn't have that issue. When we went in for the interview, we interviewed with the principal of the middle school, who is now has switched roles as to more of a, I think maybe more of like a superintendent role she did. But she interviewed us, and then another woman did. And really, it was very relaxed. They talked to the kids. They shared how the testing went and that they tested fine to go in, which I assumed they would be fine. I didn't think that they would be behind or anything, but I also didn't really think they would be advanced, simply because they're not used to testing, and that they would just be where I figured I would put them. And then after the interview, they just said, we'd love to have you. And they gave us a huge packet of stuff to fill out. Again, something I'm not used to. Lots of things to fill out, lots of forms and permissions, a huge list of fees, activity fees, and sports fees, and electronic fees, and all of these things we had to sign, which I wasn't used to also. So it was a big learning curve for me as someone who's homeschooled from the very beginning, trying to figure that out. So we went home. Everything is done on the computer. And so I graduated in 2005, and I still remember having notes, your parents had to sign permission slips, and everything was so physical. And now it's nothing is like that. You just have an permission slip that you sign in the beginning of the year that says my kid can go on field trips, and then they go. And that might sound silly to parents now, but for me it was very different because I just had no experience with it. And everything's done through email. And they made a big point, I remember in the interview, about communicating with teachers through their email and not through different apps that the kids will use. And I just kept thinking, I don't remember my parents ever talking to my teachers about things. I don't remember them ever calling them or visiting, or because obviously they didn't email them, but things like that, I just don't remember them being that involved. And I guess that's a real issue now. And so they were really clear about the protocol of emailing teachers and when to email them and when they'll email you back, and who to talk to when you have concerns and issues. So, someone's wanting something. Okay, I'm back. I had to lock myself in here. Where was I? Oh, just protocol. So I wasn't used to it. So it was something I had to learn too. So I wasn't expecting that. And let's see, I wrote this down, testing payments. Obviously, payments and the costs and everything is so much more than homeschooling. That was something that we had to really budget. And then the learning curve, which is probably the other thing that I think I would have liked to have known, was just how so when we had to go to orientations for all of these kids, and we went to all the orientations, and I think by the time we went to the middle school orientation, I'd had my baby, and she was 2 weeks old. So I was carrying my 2-week-old at this orientation. But I remember a teacher or someone in administration had seen me outside because I'm bouncing this baby, because you know how it is. And she had mentioned how they have a lot of homeschoolers that go there, and that what she's found, which ended up, I think, being very true. She found that they're usually emotionally very mature. They have no problem fitting in. They have no problem being involved and making lots of friends, and they don't have an issue dealing with teachers and kids of different ages and things like that. But that they struggle with the minutia of it, the institutionalization of it, which is what I figured. They struggle with that for a while, and then they find their footing and they're fine. And I, thanked her and whatever. But I think she was right, because we're now starting the next semester, the second semester, and my kids are completely different than how they started the first semester. It was a big learning curve in the beginning, especially with using iPads. So both of them use an iPad. And I want to say, I don't even think my high schooler has any textbooks, which I don't particularly care for that. I think that they should have textbooks, especially coming from Oak Meadow, where they have textbooks and they have main lesson books, and everything is so open-ended and heavy on writing, and this is not. This is very much fill in the blank and answer questions, and they have their apps, and they will answer questions, and it's like they'll be like rapid fire questions, and if they get them wrong, they go back, and if they get it right, they go forward, which is nice, I think, for learning in general. I think I would have loved that, going into having that kind of stuff when I was in school, because I went to public school, but it's so different than Oak Meadow. And so that was kind of like a new learning curve, is figuring out how to study for this stuff and how to take notes for this and when to study and where to get the information. So those first couple weeks were difficult because I was having to learn how to navigate all the apps, especially with my 7th grader, because she didn't know. And there really wasn't like a crash course in using all of their products that they put on that iPad. And I had no idea. And so we really had to figure it out together. And I remember there was like weeks into it. And I had talked to one of the teachers for my freshman, her biology teacher, and he was like, "Oh, well, there's the whole textbook is on this app in this folder and everything." And I'm like, I didn't even know that, and I don't even think she knew that. And so we figured that out way later. So there's definitely a learning curve for that, where I just didn't know all of the things, and you're just kind of thrust into it. You're just kind of thrown into it. You're just doing the best you can. And so there was a lot of catching up with how to use the app properly, how to use the iPad properly, when to look, everything, all the assignments are on the iPad and not written down. And then I think the big thing that my 7th grader struggled with was time management, having to go to all these classes, having to get all the right materials, and the stress of like, oh no, I didn't bring the right thing, because she wasn't used to that. And then also homework. She had so much homework in the beginning, and now she doesn't. So I think the teacher kind of modified it, honestly, because she had a ton of homework in like her math class. And then they dropped a lot of this extra kind of what I would consider busy work. They dropped it after a couple months. And I think it was because a lot of people complained that it was just so much extra work. So they weren't used to that. And yeah, just those kind of little things. Having to ask to go to the bathroom, having to get to class on time. That was a big thing. Making sure you brought all your materials, not being late, because you can get detentions and you can get things like that. And they weren't used to it. And I think it was very stressful in the very beginning. But once they got used to it, now, especially now, it's nothing. It's so easy. The good thing, though, is that they've all made great friends. They all have these social circles, and they all love school. And so I think that's probably the most important thing, is that it was a struggle to get going, and it was a struggle to understand how it worked. But they had no problem making friends. They had no problem engaging in class, learning, picking up things, and they like it. They like it. They don't come home and go, oh, I have school today. They hate it when they miss school. They love school. And so I think that's probably what I would consider one of the biggest successes of homeschooling them for so long. Is they actually enjoy learning. They like school. They don't feel bogged down by it either. I have one child who's a little more stressed out about grades than the other one, but neither one is so consumed with it that they had anxiety about, I have to get straight A's, I have to get everything right, I have to do it. They're actually very good at balancing out things, I feel like. Saying like, no, I've studied enough with this. Oh, that was a good enough grade for this. And so I think that approach comes from being homeschooled in a very relaxed environment. So let's see. I do feel like when it comes to reading, they are more advanced because of Oak Meadow. Oak Meadow requires a lot of reading. And they read big books, as you know, and they do a lot of it. And I think they just don't do a lot of reading here. If they do, they're very small books, or they're like excerpts of things. And so my kids were so used to reading these huge novels, and so it was kind of like, oh, this is really easy. But math and science, their science is more heavy at school, which I like. So that's kind of been new for them, but they haven't had any problems with that. And math, of course, is different because it all just depends on how they were taught and what level they were at when they transferred. And so, as you know, we've used MathUC, and I really wish I could go back and make sure that they really understood pre-algebra, even my 7th grader, because she's just in basic 7th math, but because they use a spiral method and MathUC uses a mastery method, there's gaps. And so I've had to fill in those gaps. We've had tutors fill in gaps. We've had YouTube videos fill in gaps. But at the end of the day, if you ask them, they don't have that bad of like an experience with math. It's just where they're struggling the most probably is like sometimes they just don't know that piece to the puzzle because they didn't have the same math class since, first grade. They haven't been doing that math program where they expect all the kids to be the same. Let me think. Anything else? Study habits. Yeah, just same. They've had to learn study habits because before it was homeschooling is basically like being tutored, right? And so it's very personable. And now they have to learn like, oh, I need to study because we're going to move forward and they're not going to wait for me if I don't understand this. So that's been a good thing to learn, I think, too. And along that, with having such a good attitude, it works out really well. And then, will the others go too? Probably. I assume they will. I think especially with sports, my son likes football. I think he'll probably want to go and be on the football team and that kind of thing. And it'll work out well. What I'm going to do differently, I've already implemented some things I'm going to do differently. I've implemented, I can't believe I'm going to say this, more worksheet work, but not mindless worksheet work. I had implemented last year some vocabulary books. What's it called? Wordly Wise to the girls, and they really liked it. I implemented that with my first grader and my fourth grader this year. I am doing more Explode the Code with them. And I also got a very specific U.S. history course for my fourth grader because I found that there's bits and pieces of those kinds of things that my older kids didn't get. And so as I'm watching them navigate things, I'm adding them to the younger boys. The big thing I'm going to focus on though is math. I'm going to make sure that by the time they get to 7th grade, 8th grade, whenever they decide to transfer, that their math is up to date. So I still want to use Math-U-See. I still think it is a great program, but I need to be at a level where they need to be at a level where they're not going, oh, I didn't learn this, or I'm not sure about this. So I would really like them to actually be what would be probably considered ahead in Math-U-See, just so the mastery is with all of it. Even though technically it's not ahead for the private school, it's ahead in mastery of all of those subjects. So it probably will put them ahead, but it won't put them behind, which is, if you know anything about, feeling behind in math, it's like, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to catch up? So I don't want that for them. And then, of course, I think just by seeing their sisters, they're going to learn more about scheduling and how it works. And so I think that's going to be a lot easier since we've already done it now. We're not going to all be jumping in with no idea of what to do. So I don't think that's going to be a problem with them. But the big thing, I wrote down math readiness for pre-algebra basically is what my goal is for all of them by the time they get to be like 7th grade. If they decide they want to transfer, they might not want to high school. I don't know. Let's see. So those are the accommodations that I'm making right now. We really like it. I enjoy homeschooling some of them and the other ones going to school. Like I said, the big takeaway is that they don't feel bogged down. They like school. When someone asks them about school, they love school. They want to go to school. And if you know that that's not universally like the belief. Most kids hate school because they're so burnt out by this age. And my kids just aren't. They're not burnt out. They're open to learning new things. They are more mature, I think, and more open-minded and more explorative. They're open to learning new things. They have different ways of looking at stuff. They're friendly, engaging. So I have no complaints about homeschooling up until now. The only things like I would modify are just things that we struggled with towards the beginning. But other than that, like the core important things, I think homeschooling has done exactly what I think they should do. And I also feel like this journey into private school is doing exactly what it should do, which is kind of preparing them for if they want to go to college, if they want to take some college courses or something like that. They're kind of seeing how this corporate world works, how this institutionalized world works. And so I kind of feel like they're getting the best of both worlds. That base is established, that love for education and learning and all of those important growth moments have happened at home, and now they're kind of branching out, and it's good. I really like it, and I'm happy for it. And I'll let you guys know at the end of the year if I've changed my mind or if we struggled with things. I know a lot of people struggle with like bullying and stuff like that. And we haven't had any issues with that, thankfully, but we might. I don't know. So we'll see as things go on. So that's my update from the bathroom as I hide from my children while they do their e-learning and things like that. So if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them in the comments, things that I missed, or that if there's something that you want me to talk more on. This is kind of just an overview of what I think so far. And I'll try to show what I'm like specifics of what I'm doing with my younger guys this year. I'll show, because we are still basing it on Oak Meadow 1 and Oak Meadow 4, but we're adding a lot of extra stuff too. So yeah, hope you guys have a great day.